Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rebirth Era. My name is Jessica Jade Patterson, and I'm so excited for you to join me here for this very first episode of this very fresh and brand new podcast. I'm excited to be here back again. If this is the first time you're ever catching me, welcome, and if you've been following me for a little while now, welcome. I'm so excited to have you all back, and this is going to be what it will be. And so today is just going to be an introduction about Rebirth Era and myself and why I've created or am going to be creating this podcast, where I've come from, the happiness channel, if you're following that podcast, why that all needed to be burnt to the ground in order to be rebuilt into something totally different, and so much more. So thank you for feeling the call to be here. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for being open to whatever this presents, because the first couple I'm definitely going to be winging, and then we'll see where this eventually goes to. But I just feel like sometimes when you're talking about yourself, the best way to do that is completely unscripted, and you've just got to trust that what you're saying is what is needed to be said. So I'm setting that intention here and now, that anyone who's listening to this is going to get exactly what they need to hear in order to continue on their journey wherever it takes you. So I'm grateful. Rebirth Era. This podcast, I'm a Scorpio for full context, and the last few years, especially since the Happiness Channel, which was my previous podcast all about my spiritual awakening journey, which started when I got my dog Frank, which we'll go into that story a little bit later. But basically, because I was creating that podcast from my old identity that was kind of being dismantled and crumbled based on the things that I was learning about mindset, the body, health, wellness, spirituality, I started to really need to take extra care and focus with myself instead of sharing my energy with everybody in the way that I was with the podcast. And so I'm so grateful for the people who would tune in and who were my audience at that time, and anyone who was supporting me with that. But I just couldn't continue to bring it to life. And previously, when I was in the clinic, so I was previously a clinical radiation therapist, and I identified as a very happy-go-lucky, effervescent type of gal. And that's not to say that that's not still a part of who I am today. However, when it was so ingrained in my identity, but behind the scenes, I knew that I was like all up and up and up, and then down, down, down. And there was kind of only some times where there was this like neutral middle ground. I was very up, down, around, and I was emotionally unsafe, I guess, especially for myself, because I'm the one seeing this in all of its color and all this glory. And I'd never been taught that was normal, or, you know, everything, every way that you hear anything outside of neutral and I've just got it together and I know how to handle everything is basically wrong. Well, basically, like, no matter what you look and no matter where you look, you could probably find that there's something somewhere that tells you that there's something wrong with you. And today and henceforth, I want to help dismantle all of these things, because these are just mental constructs that we're taught from outside of ourselves. And who makes the rules anyways? Literally different people in different countries and different places all over the place make different rules about everything all the time. And so just starting to kind of get that sort of mentality in your brain, in your body, and just feeling into the fact that what we think we know is just scratching the surface. And even then, a lot of the things we've ever been told as gospel, truth, history, all have a little bit of an influence of, you know, creative license, let's say, depending on the person who's creating it and depending on the intention or agenda. But that is a deep dive and a story for a totally other day. And so firstly, we're just starting here with Rebirth Era. So for me, Rebirth Era is all about that point right before things get good, but also like learning to enjoy that point. The point where you're really seeing the reflections. So reflections from the spiritual sense of the law of reflections, where if something's coming up in your universe, it's probably trying to show you something, and how you show up to that is kind of what creates the energy of what comes next, essentially. There are many different ways to phrase this. There's many different ways to look at this, but for today, let's just start with that. And what I've discovered throughout the last 5 years, my spiritual awakening essentially started in April 2020 when I brought home little Frankie girl for the first time ever. And I realized I firstly didn't take care of myself in a way that was conducive of taking care of myself, let alone I had no idea, I was responsible for another life now. And that was the most important thing that had ever happened to me. And I wasn't going to take that lightly. And so when I also realized the fact that I'd been talking about this dog for years and years and years, and I'd essentially created the energy of what I wanted from a dog by using my voice. And then by happenstance of the world shutting down and me being led by a certain number of breadcrumbs to this dog place, I end up holding and receiving this dog that I thought only existed in my dreams, which now is my everyday life, which then led me down this path of manifestation, which led me to Reiki, tarot, but again, I'll get into that story in just a moment. My intention with Rebirth Era is to help instill inspiration, confidence, and kind of a tenacity to continue to look at the reflections or the shadow or what we deem as bad and try and find the gold nuggets of how this is happening for me and how I can get the most out of myself, or how I can acknowledge and recognize the most in myself to realize I'm the baddest baddie that ever lived, and that this is my hero's journey. And I'm talking about this in first person, but my intention is to share this so that you feel this for yourself too. This is your hero's journey. You're on this journey in your life, and if you think that you're in the shit and shit keeps hitting the fan and you're just like, why me, why me, why me? I was there, okay? I was there. I've screamed at my roof plenty of times asking God, why was this happening in my life? And, I never thought I'd get the answer, but every time I just let go, the answers would come to me. And I continued to follow this sort of random chance events and inklings, signs, and what felt good in the moment to do. And I kept following this sort of protocol to continue to up-level myself in order to just kind of handle myself a lot better in the world at large, basically. So as a Scorpio, I feel like the theme is rebirth. It's very much like a phoenix symbology. And so that's where the name comes from. But I also feel like everybody experiences that moment right before the good bit happens. That really tough bit that you're like, this is really testing me to see, do I really want this? Is this really what I want? And if you're on a growth journey where you're like, I have this goal of this life, or I have this dream, this vision that's been with me my whole life, and I want to help people. I want to have an impact in my own certain way, however that looks. But I also want to vibe. Getting there, especially if you've learnt to live a completely other way compared to that, is kind of like being on the rebirth bandwagon. You're just going to be rebirthing because you're going to continuously be faced with options. I was going to say obstacles, but it's more options of how am I going to get through this next moment, which is then creating the next moment. And so you continuously learn from your own experience by testing and measuring. Okay, this worked for me. Okay, this didn't work, which then gets you in touch with your intuition, which is another conversation for another time. But my intuition and training my intuition and knowing what my internal yes and no is has been the biggest game changer of my whole entire life. And all of these other things that we will talk about throughout this podcast, throughout this journey, have led me to this intuition journey. But if I had have had intuition, if I had have had the tenacity to really train my intuition from the get-go and just trust myself from the inside out, which was my journey, I was not meant to have that. I was meant to externalize and see that my only choices came from outside of myself. But if I had have had that from the get-go, like I can't even comprehend what I would be able to create, let alone how excited I am with what I can create now by being in touch with it. And I'm constantly testing and measuring this, and you can really feel it now. Like you can feel energy when you get to a certain level of understanding. And you can probably already feel it now. You probably just compartmentalize it and put excuses on it like, oh, I'm just feeling this way because of this. Like we're so trained in society to do that. Again, these conversations are going to run deep and I'm so excited to have them. But first, let's get into Rebirth Era and let's talk about why I'm even here in the first place. So Rebirth Era is basically, my intention with Rebirth Era is that this is going to be a conversation about my life, about what I've learned going through the shit. And don't get me wrong, my life has been really awesome. I've been a professional radiation therapist helping people on their cancer journeys for the last 10 years. And I've just recently transitioned out of that into something so much more aligned, which is just giving more evidence to the fact that this stuff works. But again, we need to start at the beginning before we get to that. And I was also a professional DJ for basically 10 years of my life up until about 2022 was pretty much where I really was kind of like, I have to retire. This is just not for me anymore. But I'd lived a cool life. On paper, everyone was like, you've got everything going for you. You've got the look, you've got the travel, you've got like the free stuff. Like I'd get free hotels, free food, free everything. People were just telling me like I was so lucky. But I'd grown up insecure. I'd constantly strived to achieve because that was a way that I thought I could seek love from others. And so I continued to live that way right into like, I'm going to say even the last 2 years. You know, this was something that was so ingrained in me that it took a little bit of awareness and slowly peeling it back to move through it. And I'll just keep reiterating, it goes deep, but we're going to get to the depth. But along with the intuition side of it, it's been a self-love journey. It's been self-love, self-image. So self-love is how we see and love ourselves. It's our internal monologue. It's how we speak to ourselves. And self-image is how we perceive that other people see us, which if we're thinking about how other people see us, it's really still us against us. But we're just putting their name and their voice on it as if they did it. When really they're over there in their own internal monologue, probably thinking, oh, this person thinks this about me. And then that comes down to mirror neurons, more science. We can get to that later. And it's all things about how to take care of yourself, because it's not just a spiritual journey. It's not just a mindset journey. I had to learn how to take care of my body. I had to learn that I had back pain that I wasn't even allowing myself to feel because I was covering it up with so many things. And I didn't even realize I couldn't look up at the roof, which I can now. I've done a lot of rehab on that. But even with that, that's taught me this journey of you can probably get to a point where you can manifest things overnight. I absolutely, completely agree with that. But initially, that was what I thought manifestation kind of was, without really reflecting on my journey and seeing how many days and how many hours I talked about Frank in the lead up to me manifesting her, first and foremost. But secondly, that good things take time. Little by little, you build on them and you kind of get to see the result as it goes along, like building a muscle or building a skill, like learning a language. Everything takes that little bit of a moment of overcoming yourself until you get to a place where you're like, damn, I just riffed out in French with the French person and they thought I had like a solid accent or something, you know? That's where you can get to, but you have to have the drive and tenacity and just the sheer, I'm not going to give up because I just want to get to a point where I can show all of y'all exactly what I can do. And so this is what the podcast is about. It's going to be personal stories from me about how that was my mindset and how I used used what I learned. I used this sort of way of thinking and I kept moving through what felt like the darkest moment of my life in order to get to the other side where I've just got hindsight as this beautiful gift that I now get to share with everyone. So welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's so good to finally be here. And so at the end of the day, everything is telling us something that is either going to help us or hinder us on the path to where we want to go. So are you ready to take the call is the question I have written here. And it's not that they're, the hindrances aren't something that you want to avoid. Like even yesterday, I do intuitive testing even on places when I go to get a coffee. Like, do I want to go to this place today? And I can even start to feel into like if my emotions are like guiding me to one place versus my intuition guiding me to another. Now, sometimes it's not so clear. So when I go and follow this emotional, moment to take me to a certain coffee place or whatever, that can still be seen as a hindrance, essentially, because I'm getting a coffee that I'm not really like vibing, and then I'm going, ugh, why didn't I follow my intuition and just go to the other place? You know what I mean? Like, the hindrances, like even in that example, I'm gaining evidence to the fact that my intuition knew where to take me. Nothing is lost if you choose to see it as a gift, right? And you have to actually buy into this mindset, which can be quite triggering for people who aren't on that bandwagon. I know I used to listen to manifestation teachers and just be like, what do you mean? You just like think a certain way and then now you get what you want, And it can be that simple, but depending on where you're at in your journey, it has to be a built skill. My main MO prior to all of this work, I was very reactive. Like I said, I had emotional ups and downs, and I wasn't taught how to navigate the world from a grounded, level-headed place. I literally thought that in order to be loved, I had to achieve massive things. And even though I was achieving these massive things, I couldn't understand why I wasn't happy. And I had all these beliefs that compounded over the years, and that showed up in the way that I spoke to myself, the way that I spoke to others, the way that I interacted with the world around me. And it is what it is. That's all made me exactly who I am today. And all of that stuff led me to being here, being able to share this with you. But if I had have just gone at the start when I was still in so previously to COVID in 2020, I was a DJ and a radiation therapist, but because of this unhappiness, I was also medicated with Lexapro for anxiety and depression, and I also had a alcoholic kind of nature to me. I wouldn't call myself an alcoholic now. I do now see that journey as a really massive tool for me. And to be honest, at the time, I was having the most fun I could with the tools I had. That is the way that I describe myself. I don't really like labels anymore. I used to call myself an alcoholic when I was talking on the happiness channel. I thought it was a lot more easily identifiable to the mainstream world. But the way that I truly see it is, like, yes, I had a problem in the sense that I had this hole in me that needed to be filled and satiated just so I could feel calm and feel relaxed and feel okay. And the only way I could find that grounded calm was by giving myself alcohol, drugs, different types of things like that in order to kind of quieten down the noise and the feelings in my body that I didn't really get any kind of peace or calm any other way, besides the fact that my whole body and back and everything was constantly like agonizing for me. Like I learned to live with it, but in deconditioning it, I really realized how much pain I was in the whole entire time. And I was covering that with all of these different substances. And so I even had days, like I was also very into gambling. So there would be days where I'd spend my paycheck all the way down to zero. Logically, I know not to do that. But there were things in me, like I just had holes that I was trying to fill, and I wanted to change my life. And these were the tools I had at the time that I thought that I could try and use. And by testing and measuring even those, by doing it and then seeing how I felt afterwards, I learned a lot about what I liked, what I didn't like, what made me happy, what didn't make me happy. Did I still go back and make some of those mistakes more than once? Absolutely. Do I do any of those things now? No. And I have no inclination to do them now because I tested and measured these things ad nauseum. And that was my journey for me. Other people's journey will be different. The point is, when we judge other people along our way to getting where we want to go for ourselves, we actually hold ourselves back because we kind of go, we put things in boxes. This is right, this is wrong, this is bad, this is good, when everything just is. And if we see it more as leading us to where we want to go, the obstacles that come up are growing us into the version of us, the future version of us. There's a lot of manifestation talk about, connecting to your future self. One way to do that is to overcome the current ways of being in order to do something different. And sometimes that, for me personally, has meant making a mistake along the way. And so, a quick version of this story, because I want to keep this episode at about 30 minutes. We absorb about 25 minutes worth of information at any one time. And so keeping the first few episodes short just feels important to me. And then we can get deeper into my story later. But I also just need to put this out so I can start getting the ball rolling, because I have a message to share and it's important. So prior to 2020, radiation therapist, DJ, alcoholic, anxiety, depression, medicated. I wasn't going to therapy. I didn't believe in it. I was very reactive, and I would store all of my feelings up until one day I would just explode. I was very, very different to how I present these days. And I used to be very ashamed of that until I learned to find forgiveness with myself and kind of learn me judging myself is just keeping me from sharing myself with others. And there's probably people out there who are listening to this and going, wow, that's exactly where I am. And you're like, I'm just evidence to you that you can do this too. That's when we feel jealousy about other people, we are literally depriving ourselves of that moment of, wait a second, they're being an example for me of what's possible for me. They're showing me what I can have. Like, it wouldn't be in a universe if it wasn't possible for you. And you have to, maybe it's not as literal as that, but it kind of is at the same time. But we're going to grow on this. And so one day, sometime soon, I'm hoping, if you don't already, you'll see things the way that I'm trying to explain them. But yeah, I was unhappy. I was miserable. And so I did a lot of travel in 2019. I was traveling, working all weekends as a DJ, flying in and out of the state so I could play at all different clubs and all sorts of things, because the work was there and I was making bank and I loved that. But I was also spending it as fast as I got it, because again, it didn't feel safe to me to hold money. There's so many different things that come back, but it's basically, if we have beliefs and things impact our safety, our energy is just going to repel them, or we're going to act in certain ways that kind of just get rid of stuff. So then we go back to our version of normal, which logically you would be like, having money should make you feel safe. I agree, but for whatever reason, which I have had to dive into, it didn't. So when 2020 hit, I was living with really beautiful but younger housemates, and like prior to that, like we were jamming, we were partying, but I was internally feeling at my absolute worst, and I was drinking more than ever, and I was just like getting through to then get through my work, to then sleep, to then get through the next day. That was pretty much rinse and repeat. I felt happy when I was being validated by the world around me about how good a DJ I was, or how good a radiation therapist I was, and how much I was impacting people's lives and things. But internally, my internal talk to myself was trash. I thought I was the worst thing that ever existed. I would blame everybody else for everything all the time, and I would never want to recognize my own part in it, which is a very normal thing, and a lot of people do that, but also it's keeping you from where you want to go, essentially. I had to learn that one the hard way. And so yeah, the borders shut down. I was dating somebody who lived in Europe at the time, and I'd finally only just met them in 2019, and I was like, this is it. This is my person. Like, I put all of my highest hopes on everything, that it was all finally happening for me, and it was all finally going to go the way that I wanted it to go. And then the borders shut down, and I was still encouraged to take my 6 weeks of leave that I'd booked off of work, and I was living with housemates that both worked at home while I was going to work with the literal same people every single day in a very specific team in a global pandemic where not only the patients are stressed, but all the staff are stressed. Nobody knows what's going on, and nobody's learned how to actually navigate something so wild. And so it created energies of really uncomfortable moments, really uncomfortable interactions, really like uncomfortable days. Like it was growth producing. And so everything in me just knew I was struggling. I was down to the final hair that was about to snap, and then everything was just going to come caving in. And so a sign came my way with a woman from my work who went to this place and she was holding all of these cavoodles. What? Like, what do you mean you're holding all these cavoodles? That is my dream dog. Like, where were you? 20 minutes from my house, turns out, at this farm. And I was like, what? Like, what do you mean? And so from that point on, I started looking at these dogs every single day. I didn't even tell my housemates. I told one of my housemates who liked dogs that I was thinking about it and that I was going to do it. But the other one, I couldn't even bring myself to do it. I couldn't bring myself. I was scared. I was scared of what they thought. I was scared of what was going to happen. But I knew I had to take a chance on myself or I was going to regret it for the rest of my life. And so the rest is like fell into place after that, basically. But I put $500 deposit on this dog. And then I went home and I was like, hey guys, I've decided to buy a dog, and so from that, I know I can't live here with it, so I'm going to move out. I haven't found anywhere yet. I'm going to be picking up the dog in a week. The whole getting the dog is a whole other spiritual story that we'll have to go down that rabbit hole another day. But yeah, I was like, guys, I have to do this. This is something I feel like I have to do, and to be honest, I feel like it's about time that I just live on my own, and if we're going to shut the world down, maybe this is the time to do it. Everyone thought I was crazy, and probably because internally I thought I was crazy too. But I took a chance, and it was tough, man. It was so tough, but having this little teeny weeny dog that fit into one of my little teeny weeny hands and like holding her for the first time and just being like, man, like this is my responsibility and I get the honor of taking care of her, like for her life. Like I feel so grateful. And so I learned how to take care of myself by learning how to take care of this dog and following the signs thereafter. Like if I felt an inkling, which now I know is intuition, I followed it. And I just saw what happened. I just allowed myself to be curious about what was being presented to me. And I have so many stories about what following that curious little nudge led me to. So many. And every single time, whether it went the way that I wanted it or not, I learned and got exactly what I needed from each and every single experience. And so, yeah, that story goes so much deeper. There's a lot to do with every area of my life, work, love life, and building and rebuilding myself from the ground up over and over again. And also as well, I don't think enough people talk about the fact that as you're deconditioning things that you'd previously known about yourself your whole life or about the world your whole life, you actually have to grieve. Like there was so many I'm really fortunate in a really unusual way that I have been around a lot of moments in time where I've had to deal and understand what it feels like to lose people or go through like a death journey with people. Obviously, I was in cancer care, and I've obviously I fell in love with a lot of my patients. They treated me like family, and being in service to a lot of those people will always be something really valuable and important to me on my heart. Oh my God, it makes me emotional even thinking about it. But I've had to see a lot of people go through from being healthy to crossing over and all sorts of things. And so by going through that, you really learn how to feel your feelings through grief. And I wasn't really ever taught to feel my feelings in general. If anything, I was taught that all of my feelings were bad, and to even feel anything outside of happy around anyone, that was the worst thing I could ever do. Basically, that was pretty much my MO from the time that I could ever remember. And so learning how to grieve patience was a very big moment for me. And then learning how to feel my feelings for myself thereafter was a huge journey. But feeling our feelings is so important, and there will probably be a whole other episode all about feeling your feelings and all sorts of things, but I really do want to just keep this brief today. That's pretty much the start of the story. Maybe the next part we'll get into the whole story, and then we'll see where it takes us from there. But what I do now, I work from home. I get to hang out with Frank every day. She's one of my best friends in the whole entire world. And I manifested this job, again, through talking about it over the last few years to everybody who would listen. And again, just seeing what was in that for me as I spoke about it, as I worked through it. And the more that I brought it to my own attention, the more that I was able to see what my beliefs were holding me at bay from actually getting that, and so many more things. But so I work from home now. I work still in like med tech, I guess you could say, and I also do intuitive readings. So my intuitive readings, I'm in a level 4 of an advanced intuition training course, and my mentor for that, or I have a few different mentors within that, but my main mentor for that is just the most incredible intuitive ever. And it breaks it down into a scientifically precise measuring tool, which you can then dive to the root of where our beliefs are created. So hypothetically, you have an unsafety within yourself from childhood because you used to be loud, and then someone said, in order to be loved or accepted in the world, you have to be quiet. And so at 4, you've crushed that emotion into a little tiny seed ball inside of yourself that then you didn't even realize it was there because you're 4. You're like, okay, cool. I get it. I'm not allowed to be myself. I have to be this way because then everyone will love me more. Cool. So then you grow up from 4 all the way to, let's say, 34, current age. And this is something I have worked on, but I've worked on it a while ago. But say you grow up all from 4. So at 7, you are being yourself and you don't even realize that you're not following that programming. And then someone reflects to you, oh God, you're being so loud. And then you take that moment in time at 7 and you compound it with the seed that you put in there at 4. And so the seed's grown a little bit, and then it's compounded and branched off at 7 because you've gone, oh cool, I'm not allowed to do that here either. Fuck. Okay, off it goes. And so then at 14 or 10, another moment in time happens where you're at a family gathering, and again, you're just broing out with your cousins or something, and it's getting a bit rowdy, and so you're just being yourself, and then one of the adults turns around, and it might have not been at you, but it's just the general group or whatever. I'm literally making this up, by the way. This is not real, but it's demonstrating a point. And so you're with your cousins, and one of the adults turns around and yells at the collective group, oi, shut up, or something, relatively reactive and toxic. And you take that on as another moment that splits off, another little branch, and that validates being myself isn't cool, isn't allowed. People hate it. And then it grows up through your body, through your system, through your life, and it starts affecting the way that you show up in general. Now, every day you're walking out and you're thinking, oop, can't be loud today because everyone will hate me. And it keeps growing and growing and growing. And so then you're at 30 and you're like, why do I feel so disconnected from myself? Why can't I even make a decision for myself? Why do I feel like I'm in this room full of people who I'd love to riff with and have fun with or whatever, but I'm not able to show up that way? And you don't even realize that this program, this belief, this thing that you're operating from now as you, who you believe yourself to be, but you also feel the disconnect from who you truly are to who this creation that you've made of yourself is. you're like, what do I do? That's where I come in. So I work with all types of, mostly women, but people who kind of understand a little bit about spirituality, mindset, wellness, and I am able to intuitively read energy fields and tap into, what is being created today. So it might even show up totally differently than it being physically about you not being able to express yourself the way that you want to. But it's kind of impacted from the same thing because the branches keep branching off into their own branches. And you're like, Jess, I just don't understand why I'm trying to connect with my audience, but my audience just isn't really getting what I'm trying to say. And then we dive back into the root, and it's like, oh, well, at 4, you were shut down for being yourself. And so now you kind of filter yourself. La, 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 la. Probably there's someone out there who's resonating with this. This is for you, but also it's just a great demonstration of how energetic root cause stuff kind of manifests into real life. And so from that, coming and seeing me for a reading, we can sit down, dive into the root, understand what originally happened and validate it, because you got feelings that you suppressed and we need to validate those feelings to kind of let them go, get them out, or just acknowledge your inner child for being girl, I love you, first and foremost. And secondly, we just taken the world around us as little kids, and maybe it had something to do with you, maybe it had nothing to do with you, and you made it mean something about you. Either way, we don't want you living like that anymore. We want you at your most amazing, empowered, and effervescent version of yourself. Here's what you need to do. Then you get some physical tools, you get some energetic tools, you go away, do your homework, and then you just see how that manifests, essentially. That's how my readings work. It can go a lot deeper than that. That is just a surface level explanation. But yeah, I've got to say, vibes are vibing. And since I've tapped more into my intuition, I feel more in line with my own sense of self than ever. And I just feel like being able to even just understand yourself from that root cause energetic perspective is so important, because it kind of just shows you that our brains, the way we operate, we're kind of like giant supercomputers, and being able to shift and change things within ourselves in order to get to where we're going and the people that we know we can be in this life to help impact others to be their best and most amazing self. It's a responsibility that is important to all of us at a really deep level, but it's important here and now as well, because times are weird, and the more we can put empowerment back deep within in order to just be the best versions of ourselves, irrespective of what's happening outside of us, and not reaching outside of us in order to get the answers to what we need personally, because there is no one size fits all approach. There are definitely tools that can help all range of people, but you've got to know how to work with it intuitively for you. So that's what I do now. It's pretty slay, I'm not gonna lie, and I'm really excited to be back. And it's really important to me to keep sharing intuition, self-love, self-healing, self-everything, and I'm excited to keep sharing more and more as the weeks go on. But if you want to find me on any of my socials, if you haven't got me there already, I'm at Jessica Jade Patterson on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And this is Rebirth Era. I'm so grateful for you joining me here, and I look forward to bringing you even more in the next episode. We'll talk soon. See you later.